Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. If you could just let us know, just on the chat, please feel free just to drop a note saying where you're from. Hello, Gia. Good afternoon, Jano. Great to have you on. Hello, Jesse. Great to have you on board, Stan. Hi, Sharon. Oh, hello, Sophia. Great to have the marketing team. Nice to have. Hello, Gia. We have about 70 people registered today for this webinar. We'll just give people just a couple more minutes just to log in, and then we'll kick off with the webinar. Hi, Sharon. I'm joining you today from an overcast Auckland, well known for our 4 seasons in one day, but good to see there's a bit of rain coming in now. Garden's looking a lot better as I look out the window. Excellent. So we will be making a start very shortly. Just before we start, I know everyone's done a lot of Zoom calls in the last 2 years, but just to go over some housekeeping rules, all participants are muted. However, you can interact with us using the chat function. There will also be a question and answer session at the end as well. Please feel free to leave any questions or anything you feel just in the chat function itself. Okay, great. We'll make a start. Just to introduce myself, I have met a few of you. My name is Avi Pranish. For those I haven't met, I'm the CIPS New Zealand Country Manager and also look after the Pacific Islands as well. Begin today with a warm namaste, bula vinaka, tēnā koutou, and good afternoon with respect to the cultures that I identify with. I also pay my respect to the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet and pay my respects to those elders past and present. I also extend our respects to the Maori and Pacifica, Aboriginal and Torres Straits people here today. So welcome to this webinar. Really thrilled to have you all on board. Thank you so much. I know a lot of you are familiar with CIPS. For those that are not familiar, we were established in 1932, ordered a Royal Charter in 1992. Our objective with the Charter is to promote and develop the public benefit of procurement and supply, and to promote and maintain standards of professional skills, ability and integrity, and also to educate persons who are engaged in procurement. To ensure we meet our charter, we offer qualifications from level 2 all the way up to level 6, and also MCIPS as well, which is the designated letters that set the professional standard of procurement and supply. We're a charitable trust, so that means that all our objectives are aligned to public good. Also, there's never been a better time to be in procurement supply, I must add, with all the spotlight on procurement and supply chain at the moment. Because we are not for profit, that means that all our operating surplus is reinvested back into supporting the profession. We are also a business as well. We support many organizations throughout the world in terms of best practice for procurement. And it's with this sales that we are able to fund our not-for-profit work and reinvest into the profession itself. We're an awarding body. CIPS is recognized formally by many nations throughout the world. Our MCIPS designation, of course, and also every year 70,000 exams happen throughout the world, which is undertaken by our students. And finally, and probably the most obvious thing, of course, is we're a membership organization, and we have about 70,000 members throughout the world. We are the largest largest professional organization for procurement and supply professions. Okay, now let's move on to the heart of our webinar. And before we move on to talent management, let's look at some key trends in procurement and supply for this year. We keep hearing from our community that good procurement is hard to find these days and hard to get. And especially with the pandemic, it's no doubt put the focus on procurement and supply chain management, and also now recruitment and retention of talented professionals. So in this webinar, I'll be discussing what the key trends affecting talent management is, and discussing approaches how to mitigate that impact of the Great Resignation that we keep on hearing about. But not only just from me, we'll be also hearing from our practitioners, Andy Richards from Auckland Transport, who's the CPL, and ADD, who's the category manager at Westpac. Really thrilled to have them on board, and also am very much looking forward to hearing from them. My goal today is to ensure that you work away from here with some actionable solutions to tackle the shortages of talent today. But before we get into that, let's talk about current trends in procurement and supply for 2022. Okay, the focus on supply chains, whether it's looking for alternative suppliers or whether it's delays in supply chains, it's all about suppliers at the moment. We have traditionally relied upon lean, just-in-time supply chains, but this is just not possible in this environment today. And this is witnessed or best evidenced through congested ports throughout our cities in the world. The war on talent, which is the focus for our discussion today, I won't be getting into too much detail on this, but we are currently witnessing what we call the Great Resignation. So I'll be discussing this in a lot more detail as we go further in the webinar. Focus on environment. There is a big focus on environment. Words such as sustainability, carbon emissions are common speak. Those of us who have done a tender recently will be very, very familiar with this terminology. Production constraints, once again, with the disruption in supply chains, not just through delays itself, but people also being away from work with COVID have all led to shortages in raw materials. A very common example is the shortage of microchips or semiconductors, which is quite commonly used in electric vehicle manufacturing and other industries. So not just microchips and semiconductors, but we are witnessing a shortage in general. High inflation. So with the rising fuel costs, which we witnessed not so long ago, impact of the war on the rising price of oil as well. Also, the war between Russia and Ukraine is not helping as well. What a lot of people don't know as well is Russia and Ukraine produce a lot of fertilizer and grain as well. So it's not just fuel. So, you know, this inflation could be seen all throughout. So I believe we'll see an impact of this in the coming months, but certainly as an early indicator, we've seen the increase in fuel price. Stronger social obligation. It's no secret that people no longer just want to work for salaries. It's very common to hear people talking about meaning. It's also things around how their job impacts, how do they fit into the world, you know, how what are they doing that is making a difference to the state of the world. So there's a lot more need for social understanding around their jobs, and it is something that managers have to impart onto their teams as well. So it's a challenge at the moment for especially we witness this in the younger people that are coming through. I call them younger, but actually the younger workforce. There's a more degree of understanding around what it is that they do and how it makes a difference to the world. Data. Everyone that I talk to is either talking about a digital transformation or looking at a new ERP system. So data is certainly a heavy focus at the moment for most CPOs that I talk to. Things like APIs, things like a common speak. So we're not only looking inward towards our data in our organizations, but we're also looking at our suppliers as well. You know, how do we utilize this data to get better outcomes? So digital transformations, data is certainly a big focus this year as well. Okay, moving on to our focus for today, which is talent. So those were the key trends in procurement, and now focusing on talent. So make versus buy, or the case for train versus recruit. This has been the focal point for most CPOs that I talk to and hiring managers as well. So I would like to discuss the following factors in relation to this. The Great Resignation, what it is and what is it, and what are the factors that are driving it. Salaries and hourly rates. It's no secret once again that our borders have been closed, and there's a limited talent pool. So people know that they can demand of up to 15 or 20K more than for their jobs as compared to 2 years ago. So certainly it's all stacked up towards the candidates at the moment. Travel and OE. Okay, so as we come out of COVID, everyone's vaccinated, borders are opening again, and OE is overseas experience. I remember as a young fella, I spent some time in the UK doing my overseas experience. So whether we see a great influx or mass exodus of younger folk heading overseas to do their overseas experience with the borders opening, yeah, we'll see that happens. Working from home and flexible working. Because we have been stuck home for the last 2 years, it's kind of become an expectation that you know, there should be a perk of the job, whether it's 1 or 2 days at the office or working from home completely. So certainly one of the things people look for as well. Okay, burnout. This is close to heart as well. As we all know, we've been working from home, so this is the negative side of it, of course. As the lines between your workplace and your home is quite blurred now because we work so much from home. The psychological impact of this, you know, things like Zoom fatigue, being always online, working longer than expected. So these are all common factors that are all affecting people at the moment, especially post-COVID, with quite common to hear people talking about burnout or just needing a break in general. Workplace vaccination policy. Okay, if I can use an example of Aiedy, my good friend, who we'll be hearing from shortly. He's got a young child who's not even 1 yet. As we know, they can't be vaccinated yet. So as a father, would you be sort of thinking about this? Am I going to be working alongside someone who is unvaccinated? You know, we are all adults. We respect other people's views. We respect other people's privacy, etc. But when you are, so vaccination policy is something that people with families, people, you know, it's something that is on people's minds at the moment. So certainly that is one of the factors that people consider. Speaking of working from home, a lot of people are reevaluating their priorities, what's important to them. I can talk about my friends in Auckland who are closing shop here, basically, and moving over to farm life or outside of Auckland to not so urban areas, beating the hustle and bustle, the traffic, etc., etc. So do we see a mass influx of people or mass exodus of people of moving outside of town areas, and also things like the rising cost of fuel as well. So it's a lot of factors that people think about these days. So looking ahead, what does this all mean? 2022 is the year that is sort of forecasted as the Great Resignation. I'd like to point out to the following factors that we need to consider. So borders reopening, although I've talked about the overseas experience and people going abroad and getting their overseas experience or traveling. Traditionally, for Australia and New Zealand, we've looked to countries like the UK or Europe in general to fill in our ranks with migrants coming in, just to fill that gap that we have. So do we see a mass influx of people coming back into Australia and New Zealand from abroad? Yet to be seen. People management. Okay, I really do feel for managers at the moment with this remote management. Just that we've been working from home all this while. So just cast your minds back at the water cooler conversations that you have with everyone, how's the kids doing? How are the pets? A lot of our communication is done through non-verbal cues, so body language. These are the things that we miss out on in a Zoom call, for instance. So as a manager, this has a significant impact on how you actually understand your team's state of well-being. So it's a big challenge. I do really feel for a lot of managers. Retention. Okay, so it's also a well-known fact that procurement professionals are approached for roles, especially with a limited talent pool, and it's common to see higher paying salaries and benefits offered to candidates as well. On this note as well, if I think back, it's no longer uncommon for people to not have several careers throughout their lives, right? So, they could be in procurement for 5 years, then move on to something else like project management or something even completely different as well. So the challenge is, how do you not only retain people in your companies, but how do you actually retain them in the profession itself, which is a major challenge too. And I've touched on this before, the search for meaning. People are, once again, no longer just working for salaries again. So how do you impart this social understanding of how you make a difference, or how your role fits in? If I could touch back once again on Aiedy again, he's got a young child, right? So the type of roles that he takes, he's got to set an example for his child as well. So would you be happy working for a company that supports Russia or something like that? So these are all things that you need to sort of consider when you're thinking about roles. Okay, so I've talked about, I don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom, but I've talked about all the issues that we're currently facing. So I'd like to offer you a solution, or talk about a solution that we can talk about. So this is a real life case study. So there's a CPO with a budget. We live in the real world. His budgets. He's looking at hiring a new recruit in their team. Let's just say someone who is new to procurement. There's a certain amount of salary that they can be offered, and this candidate is being approached by other companies as well. So he or she is looking, the CPO is looking at the applied learning program that CIPS offers for a number of reasons. First of all, it gives you a quick way of upskilling a new recruit for somebody who's new into procurement. So they're training, they're getting paid, and they're getting qualified while they're working, essentially, right? And also as a strategy to bridge the gap between any higher salary offers as well. So you're offering training. And furthermore, as a retention strategy, just to give the work that you're doing, you're studying as well, gives you a different perspective when you're going through the program itself. So what is the applied learning program, and why should you sort of look at it? So when we talk to CPOs, training and development is quite often one of the things that they're always thinking about. And also, how do I train my staff? And there's always limitations, right? So you're doing your day job, there's priorities. So how do you do this fairly quickly and something that you can tie into your work? So this is where the applied learning program was developed with these things in mind. So from as little as 12 to 18 months, you can get somebody upskilled while they're doing their work. And the reason why it's called applied learning is actually, let's just say you're doing a module on supply relationship management, for example. So your assignments, there's no exams, so it's all project-based and assignment-based. Your assignments will be focused on how did you actually engage the supplier, you know, what was your negotiation around, et cetera, et cetera. And also to cast a different lens on the projects that you're doing at your workplace. So address the challenges faced by candidates in the company. And to confirm a knowledge transfer that talks around how do you actually apply the theoretical best practice that you've learned into a real life context, you know. So it's a very practical approach. And also, because you are focusing on a project, you're looking at best practice, this lens sort of casts a development opportunity for the organization as well, and not just so much the individual. It is what we call a very contextualized program. So it is targeted towards the individual's company. It is also common for companies. A very good example is Woolworths that have a applied learning program in-house. So it's the case study for this is available on our website. I'm sure Gio would be able to put a link in the chat function as well. And it can also be done in a syndicated program as well. So think about, for example, let's just say Air New Zealand or somebody from Sydney Water or something could be on the same cohort. So that promotes that exchange of ideas, a different lens, a different way of looking at problems. So definitely it's something that is utilized by a lot of organizations, and we've developed this program really just to upskill people fairly fast while you're working, and also as a retention strategy as well, just to give you more insights in the work that you undertake and how it all relates into procurement in general. Okay, so if you've heard enough from me, I'm pretty excited to hear from our practitioners, our two practitioners, Andy Richards and Aiedy. Andy and Aiedy, welcome on board.
Kia ora. Hi, Avi.
Yeah, very excited to hear from you and the challenges that you're facing, and also your views on this. Andy, if you could please introduce yourself, just a bit on our background.
Sure. So kia ora koutou. Great to meet you all online today. Talk about this this subject, which is very close to my heart in the world of procurement. So I lead the procurement team here at Auckland Transport. We're the public transport agency for Auckland. We basically look after and develop around $21 billion worth of assets, roading assets, around 7,000 kilometres of roads. We also support our business with the operation of our bus, ferry and train network across Auckland, and all of that to deliver easy journeys for our customers and communities around this great city. So I've got a team of just nearly about 45 professionals, procurement professionals within my team that look after the whole end-to-end of procurement, from category management through to SRM, and including all the procurement support that enables us to transact all of that. So yeah, really looking forward to this conversation. I've been working here in New Zealand for about 7 years, and prior to that led the procurement team at Air New Zealand, and before that had about a 25-year career in Unilever all across the globe.
Thank you, Andy. That's quite a career there, quite a career. Welcome, Aiedy. Nice to have you as well. If you could please share a bit of yourself.
Tēnā tātou katoa, everybody. So I'm Aiedy. My career began at Watercare, so started at a local council, fresh out of uni, and started my CIPS career there as well, my journey. Since then, I've worked for Crown entity, QRail, worked at the Ministry of Education, went into consulting in Morrison Low, and have recently become a dad, but also working at Westpac now as a category manager. So I'm the current chair of the Auckland CIPS Committee, and I'm really passionate about forwarding the profession in any way I can. So this is a subject that's dear to me, but it also affects me on that personal level as well, since we're all in these big uncertain times at the moment, and everyone's feeling a little bit of a strain. I hope I provide a personal lens as to how maybe my experiences can align with yours, or what I can do to you guys.
Excellent. Really nice to have you both on board. Just a reminder to our folk on the other side of the screen as well. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat function. Andy, just to begin with yourself, as a CPO, what has your experience and challenges been in recruiting people?
I guess, there's always a challenge recruiting great talent, and it's been probably amplified over the last couple of years with COVID and all the challenges around that, especially getting access to a broader talent market. But I think the challenges are always there, and they're there both from a ability to attract talent that have a broad procurement experience, so across the whole life cycle, from category management through sourcing, through to supply relationship management, but also increasingly have experience in delivering some of the diverse value that we now deliver, not just costs and commercial outcomes, but obviously sustainable outcomes, operational ones, and increasingly even revenue drivers. So the challenge is there. We're increasingly demanding more from our businesses, or being demanded more from our businesses, and therefore the procurement challenge, it keeps going up a notch. So look, there's definitely some challenges, and you've got to be really clear about then what you're looking for from talent in the marketplace.
Thanks for sharing that, Andy. I did have a look at your sustainability initiative. It's quite comprehensive, and really
yeah,
really
no,
good.
and look, that you're talking to your points around what's attractive to to potential team members is what is the meaning in the role and the organization. So you talked about meaning. I think increasingly the talent out there looking for organizations that have a clear purpose, that they're working in environments that's delivering clear outcomes that they can either associate with, or that they're committed to supporting. And then within that, meaningful roles in procurement that can help actually deliver those business outcomes. And if you then tie that in with a great culture, great environment, great bunch of people that you're working with, I think that's sort of the magic equation that allows you to at least attract the talent into that, into your organization. And that's what we're constantly working at. In AT, we've got a very compelling purpose, easy journeys. It's about connecting customers and communities. Transport is a key enabler to connect people to their jobs, to their pastimes, to their family, to get across to the city. And so it's something that touches us all. We all go out and walk on our pavements and drive our car on the roads, or take the bus. And so it's a product and service that we can all associate with. And that purpose and that connection is something that's really important, and that helps to drive the attractiveness of the organization, and hence then the role that you can play in procurement to deliver some of those outcomes.
Oh, very true, very true. Over to you, Eddie, if I can be candid with you. What do you look for when you apply for procurement roles?
Thanks, Avi. So what I look for is always aligning my values as a person to the organization that I'm working with. Being that you've touched on some of those points, that during this pandemic, we have been working from home more. There's become a bit more of a blur between their work-life balance that I think everyone is struggling with. And because of that, the organization almost feels it's at home with you now. So as part of that, if it's part of your whānau, you really have to not only enjoy what you do, but you have to understand why you're doing it and how that's actually creating an impact in a meaningful way for you as a person. So when I look for a role, I guess I'm looking at all the tranches. So from the organizational culture to what is a day-to-day aspect of this role in terms of what it will involve, and also the people that you can learn from. So how will the scope of the role in its current form, maybe that will change and expand, or maybe it'll stay where it is, but you'll be able to take something from that that'll help you upskill and diversify your expertise, because everyone, I believe, needs to not only increase their personal journey with the organization, but also grow alongside that organization as it changes. And that's what this pandemic has really put into the forefront. So yeah, that's basically what I look for, is aligning my values to the organizations.
No, that's definitely, thank you for sharing that idea. So quite often when I talk to people, the challenge of actually balancing your training and also your day job as well, it's quite a key element that comes out in the conversation. As a CPL, Andy, how are you managing, or how do you not so much convince, but how do you get the new recruits trained up, essentially? Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, obviously training and development is critical, and it's incredibly difficult sometimes to try and get a case for training and development and understanding how that fits into all the other priorities of getting the job done. I kind of think back to this famous conversation between a CFO, a finance guy, and the CEO, and the finance guy sort of challenging CEO, saying, geez, how much money are we spending on training and development on our people here? It's a huge cost to the business. And the CEO replies, well, imagine how much it would cost us if we didn't have trained people, if we didn't have people that are skilled in what they do. Imagine the impact of us, procuring something and we haven't delivered the outcomes we were seeking, or that we choose a poor supplier, or the impact could be tenfold on the cost of investing in your people. So it definitely has to be something that is strategic. At AT, we have a good strategic focus around people development as well as leadership development. So we do invest in that. I think where often we fall down is where we haven't got a good framework to identify what are the skills and competencies we need in our different roles, and not just the generic ones, maybe around leadership or influencing skills, etc., but the professional ones as well. And in AT, we identified that a few years back, and since then have developed a procurement capability framework, which tries to bring together all of the fundamental skills and competencies we need for great procurers in our organization, and match to both our AT needs, but also pulling in, what does great look like from a procurement professional outside. And we've started now to not only benchmark where everyone sits within their roles, so they've got clear role descriptions, which defines the skill levels that they should have, benchmark them against it, and then identify the gaps that informs the development plan. And you really need that structure to be able to make sure you're targeting the right investment, because there is a significant investment in people development. It's time, it's resources, not least the dollars. You've got to make sure then that's quite targeted as to where your gaps are, and make sure that it's actually delivery seeking by developing your people. So from that perspective, that's how I would look at it in terms of people development. It's really key, and we've realised that's a key foundation to making sure we've got the right talent with the right experience and the right skills within AT.
It's a very focused effort, definitely. Over to you, Eddie. How have you managed your training and development in your procurement profession so far? I know you've worked in government and worked in private sector as well. Yeah, certainly be very interested to hear how you have managed this.
Thank you, Avi. So for me, it's always about sort of where your journey begins, right, and where you want to end up. So all organizations will have someone who's in the senior procurement team. Andy himself as the CPO. You take, I guess, mentors in each organisation and see sort of how their careers have been built and what they did to get there. And I think one thing that really, really helped me was, as you mentioned, the applied learning through the syndicated corporate award program. It was able to translate that theoretical knowledge that CIPS provides and put it into a practical environment. So that's where I got a lot of value out of that, because the biggest value that you can gain, right, is to increase your network within your organization, to take nuggets of information from everyone in different departments and figure out how that all leads to the vision and purpose of the organization as a whole. And so as part of that applied learning, I was able to do that. I interface with people in departments that I didn't usually on a day-to-day basis speak to. You know, I knew they sat over there and we sat over here, but there was never any cross-pollination between us. So that's where I really got a lot of value. In terms of also time management, you know, you always work in your day-to-day roles and activities, but you also need to always in the back of your mind remember that there's an ever increasing scope and also the adaptation of procurement as the profession. So in order to be in touch with that, you have to honestly understand how can you upskill in what you're doing right now to better not only what the organization is striving towards, but also how you're going to get benefit from that, whether it's negotiation, whether it's influencing, whether or not it's understanding how the supply chain works up and downstream. So from the raw materials you get through to the end customer. So in a nutshell, I guess in terms of training, it would be understanding how you as a person align to that organization and what tools are out there that can help enable that.
Yeah, actually, Avi, I think Aiedy touches on a couple of good points there, and talking about experience and applied learning. So when we look at our training and development in AT, I think most people are familiar with this sort of 70-20-10 model of where you focus your time. So the 10% is that skill acquisition. So you go on a course, you go on a workshop, you acquire a particular skill through some training of some form. 70% of your time then should be about applying that new skill into the workplace, into your role, into your job, through applied learning, through experiential, through applying it to projects or activities that you're on, and testing that new skill and developing and gaining confidence in that new skill. And that needs to be then supported 20% of the time through either your manager or through coaches or through mentors who can help and guide you through that learning process. So you've got to be careful not to focus just on, right, that's a great course, there's a great CIPS course that I should send my guy on, you know, and they're going to come back suddenly, you know, fully tooled up, ready to do that. No, that's only 10% of the task. The next bit is to have then the support of those mentors, coaches to operationalize that skill, and then give enough opportunity for you to apply that learning on the job, so that you can really embed that then to be a skill that you can repeatedly bring and add value to in your role. So that concept of 70-20-10 is really critical, and we often forget it. How many times have we been on a course? We go, wow, what a cool course. I've learned lots of new skills, met lots of new people. And you come back in on Monday and it's BAU and it's RUA. Suddenly all that knowledge and new learning dissipates. You've got to capture that and ensure that you apply it. And you've got to structure that to ensure that you apply that learning as you go forward.
That's very true. And the application, I do remember a lot of courses that I've done, but I don't remember, basically. Yeah. One of those things. We've talked about the Great Resignation. You know, a question to you both. Have you noticed the impacts of this in workplaces, or do you think it's something that's coming?
Look, I think well, first of all, Great Resignation, I prefer the term, I think, that's been bandied around, which is the Great Reshuffle. So the Great Resignation gives some idea that suddenly everyone's giving up their jobs and going off, climbing up mountains or finding themselves, or, you know, not continuing with their career. I think the Great Reshuffle for me is a better term, in the sense that what we're seeing people doing is basically prompted everyone in this time that we've had, often remotely, it's given us some space in some cases to just reassess our priorities and look at, what is it I'm seeking in a role or a job or a career, and trying to find a better life balance. I don't like the term work-life balance because it suggests that somehow work is not part of life. I prefer to talk about life balance, which includes work, but it also includes your friends, it includes your pastimes, it includes yourself, it includes your family, clearly. So it's about a whole myriad of things that make up your life balance, and work is an important part of it. And so I think a lot of people have taken a bit of time out and reassessed that, and I think that's created obviously a lot of probably additional movement across roles, or people have taken that opportunity to say, look, actually I've been thinking about this for some time now and just don't feel comfortable with what I've got, or there's really now an opportunity to move on. So I'm for sure there's been a lot more movement. I think I saw somewhere that in LinkedIn globally had done some studies looking at movement of people as they change their job titles and everything else in their LinkedIn profiles. And basically that last year, the number of people changing roles was up 25% compared to pre-pandemic levels. So there's no doubt that there has been that reshuffle, maybe resignation clearly is part of it, but that reshuffling of roles. And so we've felt it, and it puts then a much more of an onus on, okay, well, so if you've attracted some talent within your organization, how do you then retain that talent? And part of it is the development piece, because we're all looking for progression, we're all looking for learning, we're all looking for opportunity to progress within our careers. So the development piece is really key. But there's also this retention piece. I like to coin it with my team, the concept of trained to be able to leave, but motivated to stay. I think it was Richard Branson that coined the phrase, or similar words, decades ago, as part of the way that he structured his talent proposition within the Virgin Group. But the idea being that there's a clear business case to invest in your people and train and develop the very best in your industry, in your profession. But conversely, you've got to then have the other side of the equation of how do you motivate then people to stay within your organization, so that you give them, and what are the things there? Obviously REM package is one, but I don't think that's a key determinant. It's more about, is this a place I want to work in? Does it give me a sense of purpose and meaning in my role? Have I got an opportunity to progress my career, learn new skills, have great new experiences in my work life? Is it a culture that I want to work in that respects my life balance and gives me those opportunities to be able to leverage that? And so I guess that's the Great Resignation clearly has accelerated, or the Great Reshuffle accelerated movement of people, probably a one-off, but it's certainly reshuffled the deck. I wouldn't, but it's then put more of an onus on us as organizations to then attract that talent that is moving around, and at the same time try and retain the talent you already have and motivate them to stay. So it's a sort of two-edged sword, I guess. But for sure, to answer your original question, we've definitely seen additional movement and change going on. There's no question there's definitely more of a challenge, and that so-called war on talent has probably intensified over the last couple of years.
Absolutely. How about yourself, Aiedy?
Yes, I've seen it more at that executive level than anything. I think what the pandemic has actually highlighted more than anything is the reliance on technologies. And so I know a few people, close friends of mine, and they've started their own businesses because the technology's there now. Whilst back maybe about 12 years ago, you'd have to develop your own website. Now there's platforms for that. So what it's really done is it's created a shorter, more simpler way to, I guess, have your own business online. Yeah. They're recently coming back from the UK as well. I've seen it over there too. So the Great Resignation has happened over there, as well as in the area that we're based, Portsmouth. It's where my wife's from, and her family. the majority of the tradies there, they're in such demand, they're just starting up their own businesses. So the services industry in the UK is just, it's booming since COVID, because everyone is starting their own businesses. You've got a trade and a skill, you're in demand. People will want you. So I think overall, the Great Resignation has highlighted that it's simpler nowadays to, if you want to, you have that option of starting your own business. And, you know, I don't want to say it's a you know, a low risk thing. It's always a risk when you go into that. But people are more confident now to take the plunge because of those technologies readily available to them. That's what I've seen.
It's very true. I did spend a bit of time in Portsmouth as well, Aiedy. So when I was in the UK, good seaside town. But it's very true compared to 10 years ago. The availability and the tools available now to start your own business, you know, it's just come miles and miles. It's very, very, very easy. My next question might be a little bit controversial, but there's no easy answer to this. But if I reflect on my career, I started off as an engineer, did a bit of procurement, and now, you know, I'm working for CIPS. So it's a bit of change. How do you, Andy, as a CPO, do you try and, if I could change the question around, how do you get people from not other professions, but how do you get the transferable skills into procurement, and vice versa? How do you stop people from leaving procurement as a profession if we talk about it as a profession itself?
Yeah. I mean, I guess when you break it down, procurement in terms of the role that we have, a lot of it, and a lot of the skills and competencies that we need are transferable skills that you can find in other professions and roles. So to a certain extent, procurement lends itself to being an opportunity for many different professions. And you know, when I look at the change of our team structure and where we recruit talent from, especially some of the more junior mid-career level roles, they're coming from completely different professions. You know, we've got an HR recruiter, we've got a change manager, we've got an accountant. You know, we've had lots of different roles. Even, you know, recently we just recruited one of our transport officers who are out on the front line of our transport network, join our procurement team to start a procurement career. So I think the profession itself lends itself to transferable skills, and the core skills of procurement to a great extent can be taught, and obviously as you progress you can gain experience and apply those to different environments, and obviously gain opportunity to move through those roles. So I see a great opportunity for procurement, not just to look narrowly at existing procurement resource, but much more broadly, and tap into that talent. And you know, when I talk to my team when they recruit, you know, first of all, what I'm looking for is that alignment in purpose. So, you know, can someone really explain to me why they're interested in AT or transport, and, you know, what is their purpose in life and how does that link to the purpose of what we're all about? Then talk to me about the role of procurement and how they see procurement as an enabler, as a lever for some of the changes we want to see within organizations or want to deliver. And then lastly, that link of, you know, okay, well, what do you bring to that environment? What are the skills and experiences that you can bring to the role? And even if you don't have necessarily those specific procurement skills, for me, the competencies of being able to influence others or manage stakeholders, or be able to convey an idea or a proposition to different stakeholders, or to be really curious about new ideas or new markets, those are much more important competencies for me than necessarily the pure procurement skills. So I think, you know, procurement is a fantastic profession. You know, I keep telling my CEO that I've got the best job in AT. I don't think anyone has the sort of overview of the whole business, buying everything from stationery to billion-dollar roading projects, and at the same time have that external orientation to a market, from a little mom and pop business through to a big multinational. And that diversity of interaction and opportunity, I don't think you can find really in many other roles around the business. So that is again the attractiveness of the role, and it means that you can tap into a much wider pool. And I think when we start thinking that way as procurement leaders, then suddenly actually there's a talent pool out there that's much broader than we might imagine, and that we can then attract, develop, and then retain, hopefully, as part of our procurement function.
Thanks for that, Andy. Certainly very true. Aiedy, how do we stop you from moving from a procurement professional and becoming an investment banker?
I think at its core is, again, Andy's perfectly hit the nail on the head, is those transferable skills. Procurement, the procurement skills are there. You can learn the process. I think it's developing some of those softer skills that may not be something that just comes naturally to everyone. Having those soft skills, being able to implement procurement plans through the sourcing, whether it's supply chain management, category management, those are all tranches within procurement that everyone can learn. So if you have someone who's a project manager and they could bring something else to the table, what they can do is provide a lens to that, which may enhance that process. In terms of what procurement, what it means to me and why I'm passionate about it, well, as the current chair of the committee here in Auckland, we foster not only those events in Auckland, but also we grow that network so people can meet up, who don't have even a clue about procurement, what it is, and speak to someone who is in procurement right now and can offer a lens as to what it offers as an industry. The most lucrative thing about procurement as well is that you can work across a broad range of different industries, and that freedom of choice is highly sought after nowadays because, as you know, people get bored with things quite easily. So if you wanted to work in IT procurement, you can. If you go from there into construction, you can. There's very there's reduced barriers. So if you're if you're a quantity surveyor, you're in the construction industry predominantly, and you're working on those construction projects. So procurement really broadens your horizons as a foundational base to anything that you want to get into. And like I said again, the Auckland Committee up here, we're a network here that we champion procurement from everything we do. So we can't yell enough good things about it, and we're always trying to keep bringing that new generation in. So creating advocacy for the procurement leaders of tomorrow, and and the change that they'll foster is something that we're really passionate about.
Excellent. We need to move on to the question and answers from the audience. But before we do that, just quickly, I know advocacy is a big part of our roles. Andy, certainly interested to hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, look, I mean, for those of you who may not know, especially maybe our Australian colleagues, here in New Zealand, we have the Procurement Excellence Forum. So it's made up of passionate procurement leaders in our country here. We're looking to really drive excellence in procurement, and we have a number of different areas that we focus on to really drive the profession forward. And one of them is is around talent. I'm privileged enough to lead the talent workstream within that forum, and we're absolutely focused on how, as a profession within the country, across private and public sector, can we raise the game in terms of our talent. And we've at the moment we focus very much around early careers and how do we attract initially graduates or school leavers into the profession, and then how do we provide them with the support and opportunity to develop. And as you know, Avi, we're in the process of the PEF working with CIPS to provide a tailored New Zealand context program with CIPS to provide them with that early training and development and experience in their roles, to provide them a really good foundation for their careers. And we're really passionate about building that foundational pipeline so that we aren't facing some of the challenges we face now, especially for those more senior roles or mid-career roles where we're struggling to find the talent either here in New Zealand or indeed abroad. So There are, in terms of advocacy, there's some groups like CIPS, like Procurement Excellence Forum, that are absolutely advocating and supporting and putting resources behind developing and ensuring we manage that pipeline of talent here in New Zealand, and we do that collaboratively together, because we're small, certainly New Zealand, to a certain extent Australia as well. We're small countries fighting in the global market of talent, and so we need to really be focused on how do we do this collectively together.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate your work. Aiedy, quick one, my friend.
Yeah, the continued advocacy as an ANZ chartered procurement professional. There's the hours that you have to dedicate in to giving back to the profession, but then there's a step further and beyond, which is being part of your regional committee. We've got Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch, and our committee is always open for new members. We can't get enough support. So what I'd recommend is, if you really are passionate about procurement, you want to stay ahead of the curve, you want to know what's going on and be on the pulse, join one of the committees and see what they're about. And also they're always open, and they're always open to lending an ear. So if you've got an idea about something, no idea is ever going to get shut down. And that's the thing here, is that we live in a great democracy, that anyone can come in and your views will be heard, and we'll obviously do our best to sort of guide you along as much as we can. And yeah, I guess that's the advocacy we bring.
Thank you, Aiedy. Before we move on to our question and answer session, down to struggling for time at the moment. Sorry about that. Just on the applied learning case study, there's a really good case study from Woolworths, which follows the journey of the participants and how the type of work they were involved in, and a few interviews on there as well. Sophia, my colleague, will put the link. Thank you, Sophia, in our chat function. Excellent. So a couple of questions. One from Stan Pope, FSIPS. It's a question around the value of management. Quite often, it's around how do you effectively train your managers to be managers, essentially.
Yeah, look, I guess that Stan, you raise a good point. Training and development doesn't stop at the team members within procurement. It's applicable to our leaders and to our people leaders within our organisation. So, I wouldn't want you to think that the focus is just around the teams and developing skills. I think we absolutely need to focus on our leadership skills, because a big part of enabling then that talent to both be attracted, be developed, and indeed retained within an organisation to a great extent will be down to those leaders. So we've got to make sure we do invest in our leaders as well, and ensure they're equipped with the tools to be able to lead through their people in organisations. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And we've also got, I would suggest, a lack of good leadership, around the traps that we need to also take care of and nurture as well.
Thanks, Andy. Before I move on to you, Aiedy, I'll give you the opportunity to answer both questions, just for the sake of time. There's a good point from Prashant. It's around transferable skills to be able to move into procurement, but then it also raises the question that why do we need procurement specialists functions, and how procurement adds value?
Yeah, look, I guess the point I was trying to make, there are obviously some very professional specific procurement skills, that make up what we do. So there's certain discipline, structure, processes, etc., that add value. I guess my point was that it's easier, I'm not saying it's easy, but easier to train those skills than, for example, to train some of the competencies, some of that diversity of thought that people bring, different experiences. That's a bit harder to really develop and get hold of with talent. My experience, certainly in recruiting, great talent within our teams, if I had to make a choice between the competencies, the experience, the diversity of thought and thinking that they bring to a role versus their pure, let's call them procurement skills, which I think are valuable and needed, then I'd probably always go for the competency side, because I know I can probably develop that person around their professional procurement skills more easily than try and develop some of the more competency-based skills. but they're definitely still important. There is such a thing as a procurement profession, no doubt, but I think we are, and on the other side, quite generalist as well.
Over to you, my friend Aiedy. Thank you, Andy.
I'd say, so I'll answer the last question first. So in terms of that question, that's a great question. In terms of transferable skills wise, in order for a procurement function or a department to be useful, right, you have to add value some way. So what I think this is being embedded into the organization. So what procurement can do to help other departments become better is effectively the answer to that question. So whether it's understanding the types of risk within an organization, whether it's developing the tools and metrics to actually implement sustainability, whether that's through the social impact, environmental, social, economic. Another thing could be, for example, the supply chain, understanding up and down the supply chain, what is the supply chain relationships between the biggest suppliers and your medium and smaller suppliers? How are those relationships going? And how maybe you can derive more benefit out of those contracts and relationships. So that's where procurement as an embedded function can add value to the whole organization. So even though you've got the transferable skills, you've got those core procurement skills, you need to be embedded in the organization well enough to understand how you can deliver value to those different departments and functions. In terms of that first question, Stanley, I guess it's more around, for example, myself, whether or not I believe in the leaders who are leading the organization. So if I believe in them because they are the face of it, then obviously I'm going to, strive my best as I can to help enable what their vision is. But they need to also be realizable goals. So I guess, even though they are part of the leadership team, they need to have, I guess, interactions with people at the middle level and also the lower level of the organization. So, as a hierarchy wise, but we should have a flat organizational structure, in my opinion. That's, long story short, that's my answer.
No. Excellent. Thank you both so much for your time today. I know it's a busy time of the year with end of financial year, but truly appreciate you taking the time, and always great to hear from our practitioners. Certainly value your conversation today. And thank you to everybody that joined today. Thanks for taking our time today. And also please remember to fill out our post-webinar questionnaire or survey. Certainly helps with us, it's a great help to both our panelists and also to us as well when we're setting up events like this. And if you do need to reach out to one of the CIPS team, my contact details are on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me. We do free consultations as well. So certainly be very, very interested to hear from you. Thank you once again for joining today. I certainly enjoyed the session. I hope both Andy and Aiedy, you had a good time. Enjoy the session as well.
Thanks very much for inviting us.
No problems.
Thank you, Avi.
Excellent. Thanks so much. A very good afternoon to everybody.
Thanks, everyone.